Perfect. Let's start this thing. So welcome to the webinar about how to win in the current housing market. My name is Kimo. I'm the founder of Expat Housing Network, and I'm half Dutch, half Caribbean. So I know what it's like to move to a new country, and I'm a proud father of a daughter of 4. She actually thinks she's 16, so she's a little bit of what is it, a three-nager or four-nager in this time. I bought my own home 5 years ago. Back then, I wasn't in this business. So it took me a while before I could buy a home because it was quite competitive back then. So it had to take 7 offers before I got my offer accepted. That wasn't also the motivation to get into this business. We were supporting people with finding a home to rent back then. But after a while, people started asking, can you also help with buying? And after I got over my initial shame of having 7 offers rejected before getting an offer accepted, we decided to do more research on the market and figure out, okay, how can we actually launch a service like this? This was years ago. We've helped numerous people, I would say hundreds of people buy a house since then. So that's a good sign. And honestly, if I knew then what I know now, oof, things would have looked so much different. But I'm here to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes. Today's goal is to add value to you guys. What I would like to suggest is that if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A. I'll try and answer those questions at the end of the presentation because I want to make sure that everybody sees what I've got to present. And at the end of the presentation, I'll try and answer all of the questions that are out there. Before though, I would love to get to know you a little bit better. I've prepared a poll. Maybe you can see that now. I would love to know or get to know you a little bit better to figure out if we can maybe tailor make this webinar a little bit to your requirements. So please feel free to answer these questions. It's not mandatory. You don't have to. I'll give it a few more seconds. We're seeing the first answers actually come in. Thanks a lot for supporting. Thanks a lot for answering the questions. Perfect. Great. So where did you find out about this webinar? Majority of you say Facebook or a friend or colleague. How old are you? The majority is actually between 26 and 34. And what does your household look like? A few singles and a few couples. And why would you decide to buy? The majority of you because you would like to settle. Perfect. Thanks a lot for that. That gives me some insights. Let's move on. So today we'll talk about a few things. First, we'll talk about the mind state. But before that, I'll share a little bit of an introduction about Expat Housing Network. We'll talk a little bit about the mind state afterwards, and then we'll talk about 5 tips to succeed in the current housing market. Greatness is achieved in the agency of others. So here is the team I am surrounding myself with, and they're actually the force to be reckoned with in EHN. They actually will support you with buying a home. And the good thing is that they come from all over the world. So they've moved here, they've actually bought a home themselves, and then several years ago they joined Expat Housing Network to become consultants to support other internationals with buying a home. So they know what it's like to go through that experience, and they're the best to help you out. Some more information about us. We're not traditional real estate agents. We don't consider ourselves like real estate agents. We like to say that we're real estate consultants. Why is that a difference? Because there's a bit of a image that real estate agents have here in the Netherlands. They're these fast guys with slick hair and scooters that only do it for the deals, for the money, and moving bricks. We're not like that. We are here to support you and make sure that the experience is pleasant, and we're here to help you find a home and feel at home. The other thing is that we focus only on helping you find a home to buy, or some cases to rent. In this case, you'll be looking to buy. This is the specialty. This is our focus. This means that we'll not be distracted by any clients that want to sell their property. And currently, it's a seller's market. So compare us with a agent that can do both selling and buying. Most likely, they'll give priority to the selling party versus the client that they can help with buying. We don't. We focus on buying, and we have all our processes, network, and so much linked to that, and have gotten pretty good at it. We also charge a fixed fee, so no commission. We don't believe you should pay more if you're already paying more for the property, and we know what it's like to settle into a new country. These are the services that we offer. One is a unaccompanied service, so we'll do everything for you except for the search, and we'll do it from the comfort of our desk. So you'll see us a lot in this way, via the digital way, we'll do the intake. You'll have a personal buying manager. We'll do property review. We'll do market value definition of the properties. We'll offer submit, and we'll review legal documents, book third parties, and make sure you're ready for transfer. There's no cap on how many offers you can submit or how many properties we review. When it comes to complete, this is where we hold your hand a little bit. So we'll schedule the viewings, we'll attend the viewings, we'll attend the inspector, the notary, and all third-party meetings. So this is more time-consuming, but if you prefer to have us around when you view the first properties initially, then we're happy to do that, but we'll charge a little bit more for that. What's our added value? So selling agents take our offers more seriously because we've done our due diligence. So if they compare an offer from us to an offer from somebody without an agent, then most likely they'll go for our offer. And we can sometimes book in viewings when it's no longer possible. We also support reviewing the legal documents. And one of the most important things we help with defining the market value. We'll inform you about rules and regulations. And of course, we make sure you don't make the same mistakes that I made when I started with buying my own home. The majority of our clients buy a home with our assistance and as well below or equal to the market value. We'll get into this bit a little bit later. But before we talk about the mindset a little bit, because the market is currently very competitive and you're probably reading a lot of things in the news, but I want to make sure that you're entering this market with the right mindset. This is the market trajectory over the last, 16 years. You see that we had a bit of a dip after the global financial crisis, but since then, prices have gone up, up, up. So what does that mean? That means that there's more people wanting to buy a home, and because there's less properties for sale, there's more competition. But what else makes for a increase in the housing market? These things, the fiscal benefits that the government gives to the buyers. It's very interesting to buy a home versus renting a home. Why? Because you get tax exemption. If you're 34 years or younger and you buy a home up to 400,000 euros, you don't have to pay transfer tax. That's one. Interest rebate. So you get the allowance, or you are allowed to deduct the interest that you pay on your mortgage you can deduct it off your taxable income. So you get about 30% of that money back. There's also no capital gains tax or penalties when you want to pay off your mortgage when selling your home. So there's a lot of people that moved into the buying market, and also because of low interest rates, like the central banks have been printing money like crazy, so the interest rates have gone to a record low. I think they're around 1.5%, and the rents are high, especially in the major cities. There's also lack of supply. The government's not building enough properties soon enough. So add all of this up, and you'll continue to see an increase. Of course, it's very easy to think, hey, we're close to a bubble, but I believe that as long as nothing happens about this, nothing will happen to this curve either. Okay, so now you know that the market is competitive, and I don't foresee the changes or the market change anytime soon. So I think for the next 12 months, you'll see an increase in value. It's maybe not going to increase as much as the last 12 months because COVID definitely played a part in that. People were finding their homes more important, were saving more money, and didn't have anything to do. So why not spend all your time on homes? You're seeing it as well with the prices of raw materials, wood, iron, stuff like that. Those are skyrocketing as well. Why? Because a lot of people are trying to go to that same door. The same thing applied with the housing market. A lot of people wanted to buy and try to go through that same door, and therefore everything increased. There's still a lot of attention and people wanting to buy a home on the housing market, but the numbers are going down a little bit in terms of the amount of people that are looking to buy. So no changes in the foreseeable future. Then one other thing that's good to take into account is what will your reference be moving into the market? A lot of people, they compare what they can spend versus what they're spending on rent, right? So the rental price is, well, let me give an example in a few, but what they say is like if the rental price is $1,000, then the mortgage amount should also be $1,000 or a little bit cheaper. That's the wrong way of looking at it because you have your rental price and then you have your mortgage amount, but your mortgage amount is consisted of the actual interest that you pay and the principal. The principal is the amount that you pay off because at some point you have to pay off your mortgage, right? So that's technically the amount that you'll save and build up in equity. So how should you look at it like? should look at it like this. The rental price, here's an example, is 1,400 euros. Your mortgage interest is 700 euros, and your principal is 700 euros. So the total mortgage is 1,400 euros, which means you're saving 700 euros. And I'm not even talking about the interest deduction. So you'll save 30% of this as well. Then you have another option. So your rental price is the same, but your mortgage interest goes up because your overall mortgage goes up because you decide to pay a little bit more for your property. Then the mortgage principal goes up a little bit as well. And technically, you're still saving money compared to the other ones. All right. So you're still saving 500 bucks, even though you pay 300 bucks more on a monthly basis for mortgage. And then again, I haven't taken into account the interest deduction scheme here that applies to that 900 euros. So you'll save again another 30% of this, right? So if you look at it like this, you should be able to consider a little bit of a higher monthly installment what you can pay for your mortgage versus what you're paying for rent if you're open to that. And of course, if your mortgage cap allows it to. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about the mind state. So be prepared for a competitive market. Don't worry about the price in the short term. Also, one tip to mention is that if you buy, don't buy for 1 or 2 years, right? Because we might experience a dip in 2 years or 3 years. The dip is not going to be drastic because the market's so much better protected than it was just before the global financial crisis. But if there's a dip, you want to be able to weather it. So it only becomes a problem if you have to sell the property, right? So what I would suggest is buy a property if you're looking to stay for at least about 5 years, or if you don't mind renting it out after you, for example, will have to leave the country in 3 or 4 years, right? So there's definitely options there. So look at it for a long-term investment because it's one of the biggest investments that you'll make at this point in your life. Now let's go on to the 5 tips to succeed. First, preparation has half the work. So make sure you nail your finances. Why is that important? Because you want to make sure that you understand what you're buying and what you can buy. Okay, there's a few things. Define what the max is what you spend monthly. This links a little bit back to what I just talked about what's your reference, right? Like how much do you want to spend on a monthly basis. Don't look at it one-on-one compared to your rental price. The other one is get support from an expat mortgage broker. Why? Because they can actually allow and inform you about what the max is that you can borrow, and they'll also be able to tell you what the monthly installments will be, plus what the interest rates will be, and so on. The other thing, and this is probably more key, and maybe I should highlight this in this presentation, is that they can kind of like pre-confirm the mortgage. They can say, okay, hey, I believe there's a 99% chance that you'll get this mortgage, so I feel comfortable for you taking out a clause in the offer that states that you have to get your mortgage to move forward, right? You still need a mortgage, but you don't have to inform the seller about that, which gives the seller more security. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few. Sometimes they'll actually be able to get the mortgage approval confirmed within the cool-off period, which is the 3 days that you have after signing your purchase contract. By the way, I'm sharing a lot of information now. Some of the things you might have to look up, some of the things you might want to ask in the Q&A, some of the things you might want to ask during the intake afterwards. But I'm trying to like cluster as much information in this 30 to 45 minutes as possible. So this is super important to get support. Your bank is not going to give you that security, right? And then they'll also be able to give you the best rates and conditions. So I kind of like compare a bank to an an old-fashioned like retail shop, and a mortgage advisor to a personal shopper slash stylist. The mortgage advisor has access to about 30 to 40 products. The bank will only have access to like 3 or 4 products that they'll try to sell you. So have a chat with them. It's free of charge, and you have to make sure they work for their money. Then they also know what you have to spend on purchase fees. So that's not something necessarily the mortgage broker will support you with, but know what you actually have to spend. Because I think it's very important to have some savings on the side, which is the next point. At the current market, it's very likely that you'll pay a little bit more than the market value. Sometimes that's very odd or difficult to understand because in some countries it works different. But in this country, because the supply and demand is so off, you'll probably pay a little bit more for your property than the market value. So make sure you know what you have to spend on purchase fees, then figure out what you have left in savings that you can put up towards your property. Keep some aside as well for any work that you want to do to the property, right? For painting, maybe you want to put in a new kitchen, stuff like that. So don't spend everything on the property and then find out that you actually want to redo several things, but you can't because you don't have the money. I think the majority of you have received holiday pay last month, so maybe that's a little bit of extra savings there. Okay, so you've covered your finances. Now let's go over to the fundamentals, because a lot of you will be looking on Funda, which is the biggest website for properties to sell and to buy. It has about 96 to 97% of all properties on the market. The properties you'll not find on Funda are the properties that are expensive, over 2 million, because people don't like to share them publicly. I'll share a few things with you Maybe this is something you already know, maybe not, but we want to make sure that we can add value to everyone. Um, Save your search, like set up a account so they can actually send your search on a daily basis if there's new properties coming on the market. Also, have a look at the date. The date is super important, especially nowadays. You can search based on relevance, but relevance is also going to show you properties that have been online for a week or two or three or a month or longer even. You want to search on date and look at the newer properties that come on the market. The other one, make sure you filter available, because otherwise you'll see properties that are under offer or that are already sold. Now, once you go into the listing, look, of course, at the status of the property. Is it new? Is it under offer? Is it available? Or is it sold? Have a look at the purchase price. And one of the most important things, especially now when you want to buy a property and it's quite busy, plan a viewing. Doesn't matter if you work with an agent or not, like make sure that the agency has your details, because most often they'll be fully booked and it's very short notice, and then at least you'll be on their list and they can actually call you. And if you call them, if you can't get through to them, if you call them, then they'll say, no, we've already got a few requests online. So make sure you do this. Then also start looking for properties about 15 to 20% below your budget or your mortgage cap, right? Um, of course, if you have a lot of cash that you can spend on a property, you can make this difference a little bit smaller. But most of the agents put their property up for below the market value. Okay, then if you go into the listing, there's a few other things to look into. Of course, the price per square meter. We just said look at the price in total, but also look at the price per square meter, because this is what we use to compare properties with. We don't really look at the total price, we look at the price per square meter. Then the service fees. If you buy an apartment and there's an owner association who is responsible for maintaining the property, then you will pay a certain amount into the owner association to maintain the building and so on. If this amount is very low, and you can use the calculation anywhere between €1.20 and €1.50 per square meter, if this amount is much lower than that or much higher than that, then it might tell you something about the property. So ask about that. In this case, this is a property that's 50 square meters. The VVE service fees are 66, which is, what is it, 1.3 euros per square meter, which is a decent amount. It's a little bit on the low end, but it's perfectly fine. Then other characteristics to look out for. Energy label, super important. How can you boost your energy label? By getting better quality glass, a higher quality boiler, insulating the walls, getting solar panels, all that stuff. And if it's a very low energy label, then it tells you a little bit about the sustainability and the quality of the house. If it's a high energy label, you're better off. A look at whether the property is on owned ground, whether it's a freehold or a leasehold. Freehold means you own the ground. Leasehold means that somebody else owns the ground. Most likely, it'll be the municipality that owns the ground. Sometimes, if it's a private owner. If it's a private owner, stay away from their property as much as possible, because banks don't really like that. The last one is look at if there's, especially this is regarding if there's an owner association, look if there's a reserve fund, if they've saved money, and if there's a maintenance plan. Why is that important? Because it'll tell you a little bit about how well they're maintaining the building. Okay, now you've got your finances set, you've nailed your fundamentals. Now we're going to submit an offer. But before that, we need to make sure that you understand what you're going to offer. So this is the property that we just saw. The property value is 400,000 euros, or at least the asking price is 400,000 euros. Pardon my French. Then what we hear a lot is we get a lot of questions that say of people that say, okay, hey, how much should I actually overbid? And then what they're doing is they're referring to the asking price. I think that is not the way to go. Why not? I'll explain you here. Let's take this property, right? The asking price is 400,000 euros, but the actual market value is 430,000 euros. Somebody likes the property and actually purchases it for 460,000 euros. Okay, if we look at this asking price, this is the price that the selling agent defines and puts up on Funda, and he based it a little bit on the market value, but also how many people does he want to get in? How opportunistic is he? How informed is the seller, right? The seller is very uninformed. He can do anything with that, and he can really impress the seller. No, my connection is a little bit unstable. Give me a sec, guys. I'll move to a different. You might lose me. I should be back. Can you still hear me? Is that a yes or a no? Maybe pop it in the chat if you can hear me, see me. Perfect. Okay, cool, cool. So that was a quick, that's a good switch. So the asking price is the price that the selling agent defines to attract people to the property and maybe impress the seller a little bit. Here he puts it up for 40,000 euros. And now we can say, okay, hey, look, I got an offer of 60,000 euros over the asking price, which is 15%. The actual difference between the market value and the purchase price, however, is 7.5%. So it's not that high. Now let's take a look at the next agent. The next agent is working with a couple, technically the same property, but the couple is not very informed about what they can do. So what he does is he puts the property up for a little bit lower because he wants to impress us and attract more people. Because then he can say, look how many people I have. I have about 50 viewings. And the market value, however, is exactly the same. It's 430,000 euros. It's the same property. Then he also sells it for 460,000 euros. What is happening here is that suddenly, from going 15% over, people have offered 21% over the asking price. Wow, wow, wow. Imagine if everyone uses this narrative and then meets agent number one, they would offer 21% over and they would start offering 484,000 euros. That is ridiculous. So don't look at the difference between the asking price and the purchase price. Look at the difference between the market value and the purchase price, because here it stays exactly the same. So have a look at the market value of the property. Okay, cool. By the way, we're not that big of a group, so I'm seeing some questions come in. By the way, guys, I can't see the Q&A from me presenting, so maybe pop the questions in the chat. So bidding from buyer's perspective, what guarantees transparent bidding? It's very unfortunate. Most offers will be done blind, so you'll submit an offer with the agent. Sometimes there's a deadline. Some agents use transparent offering, but I've also seen how that works, and people are continuously overbidding against each other, and it's not always very, very, very good because it drives people crazy a little bit. If they say your bid is not high enough, what guarantees this is about competition and not negotiating tactics? Yeah, sometimes there's negotiation tactics. So that's why it's always good to try and figure out what he has on the table beforehand. And yeah, make sure your offer is. We'll get to the offer stage in a few. How about following maklers on Facebook to get new listings before they appear on Funda? Would that give me an advantage? It depends. Some maklers actually push it on their social medias before they push it to Funda, but it's not a lot of them. There's a few ones, especially in the Rotterdam, The Hague area, that do it pretty well. I know that Maarten Makelaars does a good job out of that, but still they'll push it on Funda relatively quickly as well. So if you're checking Funda on a daily basis, you should be able to stay on top of that. Going back to this value thing, look at the market value. How do you define the market value? By looking at reference properties. What we've done is we've created like a little newsletter that we share after this webinar. I think next week you'll get some more insights on how to actually define the market value. Okay, then you've defined the market value. What is a winning offer? A winning offer is an offer that is of a good price, but it doesn't always have to be the highest price. A lot of people think if I just throw money at it, I will get the property. That's not the case. Why not? Because let's say you, and we can go back to this example. Let's say you have a market or a market value of 430,000, and you have what 30,000 euros in savings. Then you would be able to buy it for this. But if you don't know the exact market value and you just go nuts and you offer 490,000 euros, then the selling agent will say, okay, hey, but there's quite a big discrepancy between the market value and what they have offered. If they don't have enough cash, I'm not going to move forward with them, and I'd prefer to go with the offer that's lower, that's more realistic, because it gives me more guarantees to move forward. So make sure that you offer a good price, which is not necessarily too far off from the market value, especially on a downside way. Make sure you offer a good price and that you can actually submit it and you can actually move forward with that price, even if the market value is maybe just a little bit lower or higher than you actually think. Then offer security to the seller. So the seller will want to have security that you move forward, because if the seller has to start over again 4, 6, 8 weeks after you after he's accepted your offer, then he might lose out on a lot of money. He might lose out on a lot of buyers as well. And he doesn't want that. The selling agent technically wants the same thing. The selling agent is a little bit lazy. Even though he does 20 viewings, he doesn't want to do another 20 viewings. So what he's going to do, he's going to pick the offer that is most secure. What does that mean? Okay, we talked a little bit about adding a finance clause into your offer. A finance clause gives you the right to pull out of a deal if you don't get your mortgage approved. This is why I would advise you to go with a mortgage broker, because they'll be able to tell you keep it in or leave it out. If you leave it out, that's going to give the seller more security that you move forward, because once you've signed the purchase contract, you are actually committed, or at least 3 days thereafter you're committed. Um, if you don't, if you keep it in, then the seller has to wait for another 4, 5, 6 weeks before you get your mortgage approved. And it might mean that if it doesn't happen, that you can pull out and then the seller has to start all over again. So they want security. This, by the way, also links to the price, right? If you offer too much money, you don't have enough cash, that's not going to give the seller the security that you can actually move forward. Okay. One other thing, no, hold on. Let me go back to security. The other thing is like make sure you do due diligence, right? So make sure you understand what kind of property you're buying, what the ups and downs or the pros and cons of it are, and make sure you actually relate some of that information, knowledge, experience to the actual seller. It doesn't have to necessarily have to be in the offer, but it can be in a conversation with the selling agent or with the seller. Offer the least amount of hassle. So the seller will most likely want the least amount of hassle, which means that you might want to consider how you set up your due diligence or what you actually expect. If you ask the seller to do a lot of things to the house before transfer, then the seller might go for an offer that's a little bit more convenient for him. So have a think about that. The same thing applies, for example, is transfer date. So let's say the seller has bought a new property himself, but he can only move in the 1st of December. If you tell the seller, no, I want to move in the 1st of October in your offer, then the seller might consider somebody else who is a little bit more lenient and wants to actually move in when the seller has moved out. So make sure you understand what is important for the seller. Ask the selling agent, when does the seller want to move out? Why are they selling? And so on. So you can actually base your offer on that. Offer personal touch, especially if you're buying from a private owner, it's not an investor, then they'll want to know that the person that's going to move into their property, especially if they really enjoy the property themselves, is in love as much in love with the property as they are or they were. So you want to actually give a little bit more information about who you are, what you do, where you're from, why you like the property, and so on. That definitely helps with the offer process. Okay, the last tip is due diligence. We talked a little bit about market value, and we talked a little bit about making sure you understand what the property is like. There's two things you can do. One is a surveyor. The other one is a appraiser. Maybe I've got the definitions wrong here, surveyor. So let's call this person the technical inspector. She's got the little hat on. What she does is she inspects the property to see if it's in a good condition. The appraiser comes to the property to figure out what the market value is, because the bank is only going to give you 100% of that market value. My question to you guys is, when do you book these guys? Do you book them before or after you submit the offer? And maybe just pop the questions in the chat. Yes. Well, the majority of you are saying after. That is correct. Why is that correct? Because you don't want to spend money on these guys and then find out that your offer is not accepted. What you do want is you do want to come in, have them come in after the offer is accepted and before you are committed to the deal. The date that you're committed to the deal is when you've signed the purchase contract and 3 business days have expired. So make sure that you get these guys in relatively quickly. So once your offer is accepted, get on that phone or have us call them and make sure that we book them in ASAP. Normally you get like a week and a half to arrange for these things. So it doesn't have to happen the next day, but make sure you don't wait too long because it also takes them a little bit of time to actually draft the report and send it through the institutes they have to send it to, especially the appraiser. So the appraisal will actually help define the market value, and you want to know that before you actually sign the purchase contract, because the mortgage advisor will need that information to submit it to your bank. The surveyor will inspect the property, especially with properties older than 10 years or 20 years. I would have them come and join because you want to find out what is wrong with the property, things you might have missed, things we might have missed. Make sure you get that person in. Okay, cool. So now I've discussed the majority of these things. So brief recap. Okay, so before you start, get into the right state of mind. Understand the market, understand what it will do. Don't be afraid of the market developments, I think that we'll see an increase for at least the next 12 months, if not 24 months. It might slow down a little bit compared to the last 12 months, but we'll see an increase. By the way, I don't have a glass ball, so if I would be sitting on the beach and I would still give this lovely webinar, but get in the right state of mind. The second thing is know your finances. Make sure you use the fundamentals and always look at market value. Send a smart offer, a considerate offer, and take your time to do your due diligence, but also time it well, right? Don't do it before the offer, do it after the offer, and make sure you don't wait too long for it because then the selling party might not be super happy with that. Okay, perfect. So Q&A time. I have some time for Q&A. Maybe pop your questions in the chat. There's a few questions there. What should we tell in our motivation letter? What the host expects from a potential buyer? So they'll want to know who you are, of course. They also want to know what you enjoy about the property, especially if it's a private owner. They most likely have things that they like about the property themselves. And it's always nice to sell to somebody that also enjoys and likes the property. Tell them a little bit about the fact that you maybe have support on your side, that you maybe have cash at hand, stuff like that. The more information you give that will give them some sense of security, the better. If I hire Expat Housing Network, is there a time limit to make a deal through you? No, there's not. So what we do is we want to make sure that we can actually help you find a home and secure a home. And if it takes 1 month, it'll take 1 month. If it takes 6 months, it'll take 6 months. We'll be dedicated. Of course, after maybe submitting our third or fourth offer, we'll have to talk strategy again. So what is going on here? Why are we not being able to actually secure a property? Is there anything that we can do different? But we are committed to the task. Perfect. Thanks, Georgie. Maybe I can actually, I'm not sure if you can actually see my screen. That's a good tip, by the way. I should share the intake link as well here. Go to our website. You can find the links there. Open the hamburger menu and get started, or just go to the buying page there. I think that's all. If there's no further questions, then I wish you a lovely afternoon and a lovely weekend. If there's any specific questions that you get over the weekend, please reach out to us, book a free intake, and we'll be ready for you guys. Happy to support you. For now, have a lovely day, lovely weekend, enjoy the weather, and thanks and take care, guys. Bye bye.